What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. Getting into the week, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. The other Mike is in our control room, hand hovering over the telephone, ready to answer when you call on in with your comments and questions. Now then, getting on to our political campaign circus, and it's spreading into three rings. Bernie Sanders was out there on Colbert explaining why he still has a chance to get on in there, and he's maintaining his campaign even though Hillary Clinton supporters are saying, really, Bernie, it's time to drop out. You got to drop on out. You're just getting in the way of the plan of Empress Hillary the First. And Bernie is saying there's a chance there could still be something coming out of the Judicial Watch lawsuits. Hillary's in decline. Her unfavorability ratings are way up there. People hate her. In fact, it's really hard to reconcile her claimed primary victories with the man on the street views that she is just untrustworthy and dishonest. People don't vote for people like that. So Bernie's is out there saying he's in it. He's in it till the convention. And apparently Hillary is worried enough about him where they're starting to spend money that was allocated for the general election. Normally when you have a campaign war chest, you divide it up and you say this much we're going to spend during primary season and we're holding this in reserve for the general election. Apparently they've gone through all the primary money, and now they're having to go into the money that was set aside for the general election. So from their spending pattern, they're clearly worried about Bernie Sanders, because without the superdelegates, this race would be neck and neck. Now we've got primaries going on today, 3 hours until the polls close, and we'll look at what the numbers are going to be doing. Interestingly enough, the head of one of the pro-Clinton super PACs is admitting most of their money now is being spent on negative ads. Gosh darn that Donald Trump. You know, he's a terrible human being, and he's not a real corrupt politician. He's just this businessman, and he tap dances barefoot on shag carpeting and sings off key and everything else they can think of that might deter voters. But, you know, that's actually having a backflash effect, because Americans are now very sensitive to dirty politics, and they really don't like it. Now, again, Trump's attraction to the voters is he's an outsider. He is not a career politician. He is not part of the political establishment. And the political establishment is afraid almost literally for its life, to the point where now we have traditional GOP donors are now shifting their support to Hillary Clinton. Party schmarty, we're just going to go with the person who will preserve the status quo. And if you think about it, that's really what this coming general election is all about. Are we going to continue with things as they are now, or are we going to demand a change in direction? Because Hillary stands for the status quo. Prop up Wall Street, unquestioning support for Israel, wars of conquest. We've had more than a decade of that kind of policy. Is it working for you? Is the status quo working for you? How's your standard of living? How's the cost of your child's education? How's the cost of your medication? Is it working for you? And if not, then it's time to basically give the establishment the old heave-ho. And I don't mean just the White House. The entire U.S. Capitol is in dire need of an enema, and we have an opportunity in November to do that and hand out a lot of pink slips to a lot of people who think being a U.S. representative or a U.S. senator or U.S. president means they're working for foreign interests. Because I've read the Constitution. It's not in there that they're supposed to be working for other countries. George Washington warned in his farewell address, beware of foreign entanglements. Well, we're pretty entangled right now. Now, I have to sound the alert on this horrible, horrible, dirty trick that was put out all over the Internet. And it was purportedly an infographic, how to make Bernie Sanders glow sticks. Now, one of the icons of the Bernie Sanders rallies is people will bring these little blue glow sticks. They'll wave them around because it's a lot safer than the cigarette lighters they used to do at the rock concerts. And so somebody put out this graphic, how to make Bernie Sanders glow sticks, And it, Bernie, Feel the Burn, and they've got his face on it, and they even have a little sign saying approved by Bernie Sanders' campaign. No, it isn't. It's a hoax, because the instructions that are on this graphic do not produce a glow stick. It produces a chlorine bomb that will explode violently, and if you inhale the resulting chlorine gas, you can damage your lungs. You can die from this. And it was all over the net, and everybody's scrambling to get the word out that this is certainly not from the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that you should not even attempt to play with these chemicals. In fact, in the version I have on my web, I blurred out the chemicals. You don't need to know this stuff. This is horrible. Somebody out there wants to cripple and kill Bernie Sanders supporters and try and pretend that this is Bernie Sanders wanting to gas his own supporters with chlorine gas. Now, who do you think is going to benefit from that? Who would like to see Bernie Sanders supporters injured, dead, angered? It's amazing. One of the reasons Hillary Clinton has a right to be worried about what's going on is there is a giant pushback going on against this idea of the superdelegates. And up in Maine, their state Democratic Party has abolished them. There are no superdelegates in Maine. The delegates are basically being encouraged to vote in accord with the results of the primary, returning power to the people to choose our own leaders. We may see other states following. So let's get on to Hillary and her email server, because that's where the high ground in the battle to get rid of Empress Hillary I is taking place. Now, as we reported yesterday, the latest sign of a cover-up in all that is going on is the State Department is saying that they have managed to lose all of Brian Pagliano's emails from the time he served as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's senior information technology staffer. Has all of his emails from before there, has all of his emails after that, have all the emails from everybody else while Hillary was Secretary of State. But gosh darn it, just Brian's emails, we have no idea where they went. Maybe they were being stored on Lois Lerner's hard drive. Now, this reeks of cover-up. And the defenders of Hillary are clearly thinking more in terms of a legal defense against potential prosecution than they are in terms of public perception leading to an election. Because nobody is going to look at this story and come to any other conclusion than there's a cover-up. Something did happen. Okay? Now, there's another interesting little article. This is from thehornnews.com, where some of the information leaked out by the hacker Guccifer included graphics of doodles made by President Bill Clinton when he was president. He has a habit of just doodling on paper when he's talking, and it's a way of keeping his mind focused. A lot of people do it. Nothing significant there, except that it demonstrates that Hillary Clinton's private email server is the same machine that Bill Clinton was using for private email when he was president. It's been there all along. And Brian Pagliani was probably hired to sort of update it and bring it up to date and revitalize it. But it's another proof that they've been lying about exactly where all that stuff came from. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Guccifer is now saying that he has hidden 2 gigabytes of data that even he thinks is too hot for public release and is a matter of national security. Now, of course, if Guccifer got into Hillary's server, of course he found sensitive data. Hillary keeps trying to say she didn't use her private server for classified information, but she never used her official U.S. government email account, and secretaries of state handle a lot of classified data. So she wasn't using her home server, and she wasn't using her government server. What server was she using? Is there a third machine out there? No. She's lying about the fact that she was routing all this top secret information onto her private email server. Now, under federal law, you need to remember, It's a crime not only to intentionally steal classified government data, it's also a crime to allow information to be compromised through negligence. So Hillary's latest defense about I may have made mistakes, but I didn't intend to do wrong doesn't fly. She was responsible for the care and safety of that classified information. And believe me, when you get a security clearance to handle classified documents, you get a 2-hour training session that tells you what the rules and processes and procedures are and what the legal penalties are for failing to comply. This is really serious stuff. There's no way Hillary didn't know. A good example with that email she sent to Jacob Sullivan, strip the classification headings off a document and send non-secure. Hillary had to know that was a crime. Title 18, Section 793. She can't claim innocence, and even if she claims innocent, it's still exposing national security secrets to outsiders. Now, here's where it gets a little more interesting. Remember, Guccifer, when he was inside Hillary's server, saw at least 10 other foreign-based IPs prowling around. It was like a shopping center for secrets. And here's where it gets even darker. Gateway Pundit is now reporting that Russian intelligence had been following Guccifer because he had attempted to break into the computer system of the Russian-funded RT television network. And he didn't get in there. But he was detected, and Russian intelligence began watching him and monitoring him, and they saw him break into Hillary Clinton's server, and they saw how he did it. And they're now claiming that Russia has some 20,000 emails and other documents from Hillary Clinton's server, and they're debating whether or not they want to release them. Because once they release them, it's all over for Hillary Clinton. It's all over. Reckless disregard for security, betrayal of our nation's secrets, whether intentional or not. We can't have somebody like that in the Oval Office. We barely survived the last Clinton we had in the Oval Office. Now remember, Associated Press reported that in Clinton's released emails they found malicious software that, if activated, would have been transmitting data from her server to 3 overseas computers, including one in Russia. Now, Hillary's people are saying, oh, well, she didn't click on those links. How could we possibly know, after all the mass deletions that she did to that system? And we need to remember that the email server and potential espionage, which is what I think was going on, it's a regular 7-Eleven for cyber spies from other countries. There's another parallel investigation going on. Now, the FBI took this one over from Larry Klayman. I think it would have been better if Larry Klayman had been allowed to pursue it. But the FBI grabbed it away from him. This was a RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. And it was an ironclad lawsuit that showed that foreign donors to Clinton's charitable foundation received preferential treatment from the State Department. All of these are violations of federal regulations that are supposed to keep an official's government business separate from whatever they're doing outside. And it does have specific provision. Even if you're working on behalf of a nonprofit charity, you're not supposed to link the two. So the FBI took over the investigation. Basically, Larry Klayman had the misfortune of having his lawsuit placed before a Clinton-appointed judge who threw it out of court without explanation, without even reading it. And the FBI said, we'll take over and look at this, which means it still may never see the light of day. But basically, Hillary was apparently selling U.S. foreign policy to the highest bidder. Now, I know we'd all like to see Hillary pay for her crimes, but we live in a society, unfortunately, where only you poor serfs and slaves are held to the letter of the law. If you try and steal a bottle of beer, you're going to jail. If you try and steal an election, you may have to resign and move to another job, but nothing else will happen. And those who steal the entire nation, of course, they just rake in the dough. And as I've said before, I don't have a lot of confidence the FBI is going to actually do their job. I think their investigation is really making sure that they have accounted for all the incriminating evidence so that they can shred it and bury it. like the phone records for Brian over at the State Department. Because the FBI has been the protectors of the Clintons going all the way back to the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. I also do not have high hopes for the U.S. Department of Justice, not just because Attorney General Loretta Lynch is out there saying that the decision to prosecute Hillary is hers and hers alone, and she just doesn't think espionage and treason are worth prosecuting, but by golly, she's going to get those global warming deniers. But there's another factor. Apparently, Hillary has received something like $75,000 in donations from employees of the Justice Department itself. They're all Hillary fans over there. Oh, yes, we've got to support Empress Hillary I. A lot of people are very worried about what's going on. Paul Craig Roberts is out there with an article, A Dire Future, in which he is prognosticating that if Hillary should somehow steal the White House, that it could be the end of the United States of America because of her behavior patterns in the past. Now, in the past, because Hillary was hiding behind Bill, she had a shield. Travelgate's a good example. When the Travelgate scandal came on down, Hillary was able to say, oh, I had nothing to do with it, it was all Bill. But insiders say it was all her. Well, if she's the president, she's going to do what she wants. The Constitution and the law be gosh darn. And she loves wars. Look at her tenure as Secretary of State. She loves wars. Have we not had enough of those? Now, Hillary has also declared war on the Second Amendment. She's not actually going to try and go after the Second Amendment. She's going to leave you your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. She's going to just try and pass laws that will make it impossible for you to actually get any of them. And to Hillary, that's not actually an infringement of your Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, because the amendment doesn't include the word acquire. So if she can stop you from acquiring the arms, she's not infringing on your right to keep and bear them in her thinking. This is an attitude that is definitely going to generate a lot of opposition among conservatives here. And, of course, as always, Hillary Clinton is out there saying that she will crush the boycott and divestment sanctions movement. Gosh darn, those Palestinians deserve what they're getting. I'm going to stand by Israel. That Hillary's always saying, I stand by Israel. I stand by Israel. I stand. Move there. All right? I'm sick of hearing about how much you love Israel. Go there. Run for the Knesset. Steal Netanyahu's job. Because right now, the United States of America needs leaders who are going to put America first, second, and third, and leave Israel and all the other foreign entanglements down on the floor. And right now, the only candidate who wants to put America first is Donald Trump. Now, the good news is, according to ProfitConfidential.com, the latest poll is showing Donald Trump has a real shot at winning the general election, if the skullduggery can be kept down to a reasonable level, and he's not shot. Now, Donald Trump is out there sort of escalating this issue about women's issues by reminding everybody how Hillary Clinton was Bill Clinton's enabler during all of his sexual assaults on various people. And the corporate media is out there trying to defend Hillary and attack Donald Trump. MSNBC came on out with a story describing Bill Clinton's infidelity as only alleged. It's only alleged. There's absolutely no proof at all. Actually, Bill Clinton admitted publicly to the affairs with Monica Lewinsky and Jennifer Flowers. Does MSNBC actually get paid for being this ignorant, clueless, and out of touch? No wonder their ratings are down there in the Al-Qaeda. It's just amazing the amount of garbage coming out of these main TV network news shows. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is reminding Hillary that she's doing well because she's only competing against one other person, whereas Donald Trump has prevailed over 17 rivals during the primary season. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call. Ron from the Bronx. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, aloha, Mike. Hey, your podcast, when they update, it's like May 9th of last year. not up to date anymore. I don't know if you know about that.
Well, okay, there's a little bit of a problem going on. Republic Broadcasting is supposed to have their own podcast and archive system. They're in the middle of changing it over. I'm hosting the podcasts on my server, and I'm updating them as quick as I can. But if your browser is going to its cache first, it may not see today. So you have to basically empty the cache of your browser and reload, and you should be up to date.
Yeah. I've been going to your site for the podcast. No longer I'm going to the iTunes thing. My other question, I recently seen a meme about the Dalai Lama saying that before China kicked them out, they're under serfdom in Tibet. What do you think about that?
Well, it was definitely a very miserable situation. China had basically conquered Tibet and had taken control of it, and it was a very difficult situation. And the Dalai Lama is still working, to bring Tibet into the 21st century. But we know that China was a conquering empire all the way back to Genghis Khan, and large empires tend to be like that. So,
I mean, under Dalai Lama's rule, was it serfdom? Not after China came. I've seen a meme that said that the Dalai Lama had Tibetans under serfdom.
Well, it's kind of hard to describe. Part of it was a lack of a structured monetary system, and it would be a very long discussion to go into. But you need to understand the Dalai Lama was a religious ruler and was separate from the Tibetan civil government, which tended to basically plateau out at what would be called a local community level. There was no national Tibetan government. The only societal glue that held them together was the religion. It wasn't a well-organized country, which is why it fell so easily to China.
All right, great. Hey, Mike, one last thing. Now, Christie's in charge of the VP search. You think he'll pull a Dick Cheney?
He might. I don't know. Ultimately, there's probably going to be a lot of deal-making at the convention over the VP. And, at one point they were talking about Ted Cruz being in charge of the VP committee. So that's apparently a very fluid situation. Ultimately, Donald Trump, I think, needs to listen to his advisors and pick a VP that is going to make him more attractive to the broadest voters, preferably female, somebody successful, unlike Carly Fiorina, somebody who knows how to do the job. Again, I'd love them to draft Cynthia McKinney. And failing that, let's get Ron Paul back in to be Trump's vice president, because if Ron Paul's the VP, nobody's going to be taking shots at Donald Trump because it's just going to make matters worse.
Exactly. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to the news here, article coming out of Investment Watch blog, simple headline telling the truth. The media's demonization of Donald Trump has failed. More than that, it has backfired, because Americans have a cultural sympathy for the underdog. And when the bashing and attempting to smear gets this obvious, people tend to sympathize. Because Donald Trump is just one guy, and he's got all these corporations ganging up on him. And Americans recognize the inherent unfairness in that, and they're reacting to it at a very gut level. Now, another story over at marketticker.org, the Scream Fest aimed at Donald Trump. And they're out there trying to excoriate Donald Trump for his suggestion that maybe there should be a negotiated settlement on the U.S. government debt at a discounted rate, which does, Trump is correct, happen all the time in business. And the Atlantic is out there saying this would destroy us, its complete economy, we have to be loyal and pay dollar for dollar. And Trump is out there saying it can't be done. And Donald Trump actually understands the principle of that 11th marble. The way private central banking is set up, you can't pay the debt in full. And so Trump is offering a solution saying we're going to pay back part of the debt, and the money junkies are going to be persuaded to go along with that and accept it. And that is a possible solution without needing to go through a complete societal collapse. But the Atlantic's fully on board with the money junkies. We trapped you with debt. You will pay that debt. And that's all there is about that. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the telephones and talk to Dennis in Florida. Dennis, welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, Mike, you hit the nail right on the head when you talked about how the FBI is containing the evidence surrounding Hillary's email servers. Remember when we were getting all these incidents of anthrax in envelopes, white powder, everybody was getting them and stuff, and they were going crazy, the FBI picking up all the envelopes and stuff? My sister-in-law was a chief microbiologist for the county in Westchester in New York, right? And every time that they collected the evidence that she had to go over, the FBI would come in and confiscate it. And they kept doing it so much that she told me at one point, she said, they're not going to be able to keep up with it because the public doesn't know how many thousands and thousands of these incidents have been happening. But the whole thing is containment and whether they create it and manage this crisis, but it's all part of the cover-up by the Praetorian Guard. You know?
Well, it even goes further than that, because there was actually a legitimate suspect in this case, a guy by the name of Dr. Philip Zach, who had worked at the very laboratory where the anthrax came from. They traced it by its strain. And he had lost his job over a racially motivated attack on an Egyptian co-worker. And then the FBI got an anonymous tip that the Egyptian co-worker was the source of the anthrax. They dismissed that. But then, because the whole message was Muslim, 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 they ignored Dr. Philip Zach, and they went out with all of these other suspects like Stephen Hatfill, and the rest of it, and they were building these cases. It could have been this. He could have had this air box inside the lake, and all this ridiculous nonsense. And they had a good, solid suspect they never even talked to. And this is nothing new. The FBI's been doing this all along. I mean, back when J. Edgar Hoover was still head of the FBI, a large portion of the FBI's job was to simply go on around and just quash down any observations about Hoover's private lifestyle. That's using tax money, okay? And remember the abuses of the McCarthy era, where the FBI was up to their neck in all of that, just destroying the careers of anybody that refused to go along with the let's start a Cold War with Russia agenda. You had the abuses of COINTELPRO, the Black Panther
and
coloring book, the blacklist.
Propaganda TV show.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., remember the FBI?
Oh, you know? Yeah. I mean, it's always been like that. I mean, there was a very famous movie made called The FBI Story starring Jimmy Stewart. And J. Edgar Hoover appears once in it, seen from the back only. But what most people don't know is J. Edgar Hoover was on that set every single day telling the director how to direct the movie, to produce this squeaky clean image of what the FBI agents were supposed to be, which is absolutely not reality. And then, again, you look at what they were doing during COINTELPRO. You look at all these entrapments and stings they're setting up to trap innocent people into conveniently newsworthy arrests for terrorism, covering up for Vince Foster. I mean, this is what the FBI really does. And the American people need to understand that.
We're all waking up, Mike.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. You know, my wake-up was rather rude and abrupt, because they did to me pretty much the same thing they did to Gene Seberg.
Yeah, I've been through the same process myself, but I won't get into it.
Okay, yeah, well, there's a lot of us walking around here, victims of the FBI and the Clintons. It's actually a large society. We should form an organization and have a logo and a little banner and, you know, bumper stickers.
Survivors, yeah. We're survivors, yeah.
We survived the FBI. That's a good one. Actually, down in Kingman, Arizona, after the Oklahoma City bombing, and one of the suspects was linked to Kingman. The FBI went over to Kingman, Arizona, and they made a mess of the place. And they so angered the people in Kingman, Arizona. The Kingman, Arizona Police Department produced a T-shirt saying, "I survived the FBI invasion of Kingman, Arizona," which they sold and donated the money to charity. And I actually had one of those, because we drove through Kingman, Arizona, and I'd heard about the shirt, and I stopped and I bought one. Unfortunately, it had to be thrown away years ago. But yeah, people make fun of this stuff.
On that one there. That's the new one on me.
Yeah, I survived the FBI invasion of Kingman, Arizona. I'm sure there's pictures of the T-shirt out there.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. Now then, the entire database for the Panama Papers leak including data from other offices now, has been put online by the original reporting media organization with a search engine. People are already pouring all over it. And one of the Democratic Party's largest 2016 donors, 7 figures to Clinton, is on that list of these tax havens users. They're all crooks. It's all a little private club. And as George Carlin used to say, you're not in it. You don't have enough money to enter the money junkie club here. Article coming out of Profit Confidential again. The Founding Fathers would have supported Donald Trump and not Hillary. Now, Hillary is out there campaigning on continuing the present status quo. We have a right to intervene in other countries. We have a right to force them to live their lives the way we do. Not that the way we live our lives is working all that well right now, but that's irrelevant to Hillary's campaign. Donald Trump is out there campaigning on a change of direction. Let's come back to America. Let's pull all of our forces back, pull all of our money back, and work on rebuilding America. And George Washington, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, all of them had a vision that the United States was never going to be the world's police. They didn't want the U.S. invading other countries. They wanted the U.S. government to focus on making life better for the American people. Again, in his farewell address, Washington was out there. Beware of foreign entanglements. These founding fathers wanted America to always be for the American people and not get hijacked by people working for private banking corporations or foreign governments. It's a mess here. Now, looking at Ohio, some interesting poll results just came on out. In a matchup in the general election between Trump and Clinton, Trump will win. Oddly enough, if the general election were to come down to Trump versus Sanders, Sanders would win. There's an interesting dynamic on display there. And by the way, I wouldn't have a problem with Sanders as president either. Now, Roger Stone is attacking Paul Ryan for attempts to transfer all of the Republican National Committee money raised specifically for Donald Trump back to the RNC itself to spend as they see fit, discretionary. People donate to the RNC. This is for Trump. No, we're going to go spend it on the after party or something like this. Roger Stone goes as far as to say that basically Paul Ryan is working for Hillary Clinton. And it does look like that's the case, and more people are beginning to come to that conclusion. And there's an article that came out of Investment Watch blog that there is now a strong grassroots campaign to get Paul Ryan out of the speakership, get Paul Ryan out of the chairmanship of the RNC, and to get him out of Congress completely and entirely. Let him go on out and find some useful employment. Now, apparently, a lot of people have been pressuring Ted Cruz to get back into the race, if for no other reason than to be a viable candidate for a potentially contested convention. Glenn Beck has been out there saying, please get back in the race. I can't be seen as wrong by my viewers. I predicted your victory. And apparently Ted Cruz is indicating that if he should win the Nebraska primary, which doesn't look good in the polls, that he will restart his campaign. I'm in, I'm out. I'm in, I'm out. Ted Cruz, indecisive. That's his best quality, too. All right, go back to the phones. Frank in Utah, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How's it going?
It's a circus today. I mean, it's,
there you go.
It's
hey,
insane
I just wanted to
out
bring
there.
up something. You know, it was interesting about Ron Paul. He didn't even endorse his own son.
Yeah, I noticed that. Well, you know, Rand Paul is clearly not a chip off the old block, and I think Rand Paul has serious daddy issues. You know, his father was this well-respected member of Congress. He ran for president twice, and I think Rand Paul wants to outdo his daddy and doesn't care what compromises he has to make, and in making those compromises proves that he's very much not his father.
There's only two people that I'd like to see on that ticket. One would be Ron Paul, and the second, and it doesn't matter which way these go, or Judge Napolitano.
Judge Napolitano would be a good one. I think he's seen as a little too far outside the political mainstream, and one thing that Donald Trump may want to consider, because of his image as an outsider, is picking a VP who is an insider to sort of relax that sort of tension that Trump just may not know what's going on enough to be able to work within the system. Of course, I don't think Trump intends to work entirely within the system. He's going to Washington, D.C. to shake the place up, and it is in dire need of a good shaking by the throat in most cases.
This is the whole thing, though. You know, I mean, he is an outsider, and why not shake it up with, you know, I mean, even if you do pick Ron, you know, you're getting an insider, but he's not an insider. You know, I mean, he still has those outside views. And,
yeah, but there's no question that, you know, as a member of Congress for as long as he was, nobody can say he is not qualified to be in there.
I totally agree with you. Hey, well, I appreciate your time. You got a fantastic show. You have a good day.
All right, well, thank you very much here. We're going to let you go and switch over to Andrew in Iowa. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Great show. Speaking of foreign corporate interests, I've been following Lyndon LaRouche for about 4 or 5 years now. And he has discussed how he thought Obama was, his quote, was a stooge for the Queen, and is discussing about repealing Glass-Steagall, and how, wasn't that Bill Clinton that got that going, or repealed Glass-Steagall?
That happened basically in 1999, and I don't know how much the White House was involved in that. That was mostly coming out of Wall Street, and Wall Street prevailing directly on Congress, to the best of my understanding.
Okay, and kind of relating to that, the fact that Obama and his relation with the Queen and these foreign corporate interests, is it possible that the Brexit, the withdrawal out of there, could that just all be a show? Isn't the Federal Reserve highly tied to the British?
No, it isn't. The Federal Reserve is mostly owned by the Rothschilds and the Warburgs and a bunch of other families. It's not strongly tied to the Bank of England. For one thing, the Bank of England had to be nationalized after Bretton Woods because without that license to counterfeit and force the world to use the pound sterling, the Bank of England hit some seriously hard times and they were nationalized. This idea that Obama is working directly for the Queen, I think, is a little ridiculous. All apologies to Lyndon LaRouche. First of all, the Queen just isn't all that present, you know, at her age. Mostly, it is money that is ruling the politics of this world. The age of influence by royalty and so forth is kind of gone. And yes, the Queen of England has a huge amount of money, but she's not managing it herself. She's got legions of accountants and financial managers doing that for her.
And finally, what are your thoughts on Putin's offer to the British to move to Russia and start a new life? Do you think that's some sort of a chess game going on there?
I actually had not even heard about that, but you know, the new Russian Republic's life is reportedly very, very good. I mean, I'd love to visit Russia. I don't know if I'd like to live there, but visit the Hermitage and some of the relics of the early space program. That would be a real fun trip, I think. I don't know, but it may be that. I don't know. I'm going to have to find that article because the reason I'm having problems with it is Putin probably understands the reason for the flooding of migrants into Europe and illegal immigrants into America is to blur our indigenous national populations, to weaken us psychologically. And I don't think he'd go along with that agenda by bringing British subjects into Russia, other than in token amounts. So if you could send me that URL, I'll look at the article. But I want to analyze that a little more closely.
Great, Michael. Great show. Thank you for the time.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, as you know, in the attempt to justify or sell, let's call it what it is, they want to sell you a new invasion of Syria. And they're not getting any traction with claims that Assad is gassing his own people, because we know the last 3 times they tried it, it turned out to be a lie. And the U.S. is still out there trying to say that, oh, no, we're not after Assad and the Syrian people. We're after the evil ISIS, and you've got to remember how evil ISIS is. And apparently they're not getting traction with that, because after you've seen one poorly faked beheading video, you tend to tune the rest of them out. And so you are not going to kid this. The latest propaganda video that has been ginned up to remind us how terrible ISIS is, ISIS has a choir that sings terrorist threats. Sort of like We Burn the World. or something like that. I mean, they are scraping the bottom of the barrel for propaganda images to get us to forget all the times we've been lied and tricked into war and get us all hot and bothered for more blood and gore. Please take our money, take the lives of our children, save us from the evil ISIS monsters with their Death Star and the rest of it. Now, on a more serious note, the U.S. is really rattling their sabers out there in the South China Sea. They're desperate to get a full-on war with a major state to use as a distraction. So once they get that war going, the people will complain about the economy. Well, you know, we're in a war. The war justifies everything. I'm sorry, you know, there's a war on. You've got to just do as you're told, which is one of the big lies. So apparently the U.S. has been sailing one of their warships inside what China claims is their territorial waters around one of these islands that China has been building up. Now, before China started building up the island, nobody cared about it. Nobody claimed it. It was no big deal. Then China goes on in, superb engineering, they build up this reef, they put in an airfield, and all of a sudden it's a hot topic. You can't be building that there. So the U.S. sailed the warship. The USS William P. Lawrence traveled inside the 12-mile recognized international boundary for international waters in what is called a freedom of navigation operation, which is military speak for we can go wherever we want and you can't do a thing about it. China scrambled fighters to overfly the ship and say, you may want to think twice about that last one. But again, you don't see China sending ships around Catalina Island. You don't see Chinese troops on the northern side of the border with Canada or the southern side of the border with Mexico. It is the United States that is and remains the aggressor in all of these confrontations. Okay, so we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Hello. You're on the air.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Mike. Yeah, I wanted to have a few comments about Bernie Sanders. Actually, just occurred to me first. I was going to say it's good. Sometimes when I used to accidentally call RBN when you weren't here, but now you're back. I can go back to using that address book link.
Absolutely.
But, when you came back, I flipped over my 8 timer.
Okay.
About Bernie Sanders, I was a bit troubled when you said you'd have no trouble with Bernie Sanders as president because, well, like I understand that he has conducted himself more civilly than the others during the mudslinging periods. And really, back second.
Actually, that's not the reason. That's not the reason. I wish he'd come out with both barrels blazing on the email scandal right from the start of the Democratic primaries. But I understand why he didn't, because if I am correct in my theory, and what we're looking at is espionage committed by a serving Secretary of State, everybody is going to sit on that scandal because it means their jobs. That kind of a scandal could bring down the entire government. Too bad. Right. Let's all feel sorry for the corrupt federal government destroying itself.
Right. Well, but I mean, his socialist economics. I mean, he asked some. He was only asking like good Planck questions, earlier on and stuff like that. But I mean, this guy, Bernie Sanders Nista, was a fan of Daniel Ortega. Spent time in his youth on rabidly Stalinist kibbutz in Israel. I mean,
okay, well, Glenn, let me cut in here for a second because we're almost out of time. We're coming up on the top of the hour here. I prefer we have a capitalist society, old-fashioned American style. You get rich by making good products, good services, that kind of capitalism. If I am forced to choose between fascism and socialism, I'm going to have to go with socialism because we've had a decade, actually 2 decades of fascism, and look what it's doing to the ordinary people.
Oh, yeah. Well, ultimately, both resolve into totalitarian oligarchy over time. It's just the nomenclature differs. But
no, it's a financial difference. It's a financial difference, okay? And thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Just as a reminder, capitalism is a system in which if you make money, you get to keep it. If you lose money, you are personally liable for that debt because freedom not only means the freedom to succeed, but the freedom to fail and the personal responsibility to accept either outcome, which Trump has actually done on a couple of occasions. Socialism is a system where if you make money, it is taxed away from you to benefit society. If you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses so that you can stand up and try again. Fascism is a system in which if you make money, you get to keep it, and if you lose money, society is taxed to cover the losses. And after decades of TARP and QE and bail-ins and bailouts and haircuts and shaves and massacres and whatever, it's obvious we are in a fascist economic dictatorship. If Bernie wants to take a socialist, that's certainly a better option than continuing on the present course. So, we're going to take a little bit of a break here for our top of the hour station identification. We'll be back with hour number 2 after the following words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, getting on back to the preparations for the hot phase of World War III, over in Russia, they're really starting to show off their latest and greatest new weapons. That S-500 air defense system can reach up all the way to low Earth orbit. That's a game changer. Now, Russia has a strategic bomber, the Tu-95MS. It is now being modified to accept the long-range H-101 cruise missiles, extending its strike range. They're getting ready. They know the U.S. is gunning for them, so they're polishing up their weapons. And they have an advantage. Both Russia and China have the same advantage. For the last 13 years, the United States has been pounding on nation after nation after nation. Our stockpiles are drawn down. Our existing weapons are worn out. They're not actually designed to last all that long in the first place. Modern fighter planes especially. They're more like Formula One racers. They're designed to get around the track and across the finish line, and they fall apart right after that. During that same interval of time, knowing what the ultimate U.S. agenda was going to be, China and Russia have been quietly modernizing their military. And when they build a weapon, it's to build an efficient, cost-effective weapon, as opposed to the American system, which making new weapons is all about gouging the public for more money and putting it in the pockets of defense contractors and their pet members of Congress, which gets us bloated, inefficient pieces of junk like the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, the F-22, which is still asphyxiating its pilots, the F-35, huge list of problems, still not in active service, the new aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, all of its whiz-bang technology is having serious, serious problems. The Independence-class littoral combat ships is corroding as it sits in the ocean. The Freedom-class eats up its own drivetrain while underway. But hey, we'll just go back and do a new weapons program. More money, 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 money. And one of my great concerns is that the U.S. cannot prevail in a conventional war against Russia or China. And that means that you are going to see an eventual nuclear war. And we better stop it now, because once it's underway, you just know those maniacs in Washington, D.C. are going to turn those little brass keys or flash the little card or however it is they launch the end of the planet here. Now, the State Department has been caught taking a page out of George Orwell's 1984. And it has to do, this story appeared over in Mediaite.com, where Victoria Nuland, when she was still a spokesperson over at the Department of State, she had been questioned back in 2013 about little back-channel discussions with Iran leading to the P5+1, and had denied they'd been taking place. Well, then it came out later on that the talks had been going on since 2011, and Victoria Nuland had lied. So one of the people that had been involved in this discussion went back to the video archives at the State Department to get that press briefing and discovered that conversation had been erased. Right out of Winston Smith. No, it never happened. It's not in the official record. There's no video of it. It couldn't. It's just your imagination, you wild-eyed tinfoil hat conspiracy kook, you. And obviously, Brian Pagliano was a fixture of your imagination, because his email records don't exist, and if they don't exist, he didn't exist. Winston Smith, please pick up your messages. It's amazing. Now, as you know, Iran is very annoyed over this rather pathetic lawsuit by the Supreme Court to basically take Iran's frozen assets inside the United States of America, which were, by the way, supposed to be unfrozen by the P5+1 deal. And you need to start off understanding Iran has been playing by the agreement. They have complied with all their obligations. The IAEA is in there saying, yeah, they're doing everything by the letter of the agreement. The U.S. is not. The U.S. has yet to unfreeze any of Iran's assets. And now they're trying to basically plunder them with this ridiculous lawsuit saying that the families of victims of terrorism can acquire that money simply by saying they believe that Iran was behind it without needing any evidence whatsoever. Now, this court decision has been condemned around the world as little more than theft under color of government law. And Iran has now responded by filing a lawsuit challenging the legitimacy of penalizing Iran without any kind of proof of wrongdoing. Because we dare not allow our country to go back to Code Napoleon, where you're presumed guilty and punished unless you can prove that you are innocent. It's a very destructive system. Now, having learned nothing from Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Chile, Cuba, the Philippines, the U.S. is now looking at trying another coup down in Venezuela. This would be coup attempt number, I've lost count. They got really close once when Hugo Chavez was in power. They managed to get him out of power for a grand total of 8 days before the counter coup put him back in. And not too surprisingly, the voice of the government, the New York Times, is out there saying, yes, it's time for a U.S.-sponsored coup in Venezuela. We are going to teach those Venezuelans they do not sell their oil for the yuan. They will only sell it for the dollar. Gosh darn it. So they're still out there following this agenda of conquering the world's resource-rich areas and shackling them to the dollar to prop up the obviously failing and collapsing American economy. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. People understand inherently that if you own something, oil, timber, uranium ore, your old stereo, that when you sell it, you can actually take whatever you want in trade for it. The other guy's lawnmower, whatever. And there is no actual law that says they have to go through the dollar. There was an agreement called Bretton Woods, but that agreement was officially ended when Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility. And since that day, the U.S. has tried to maintain dollar hegemonic domination of the world's economy through arm twisting and coercion and outright invasion and coup d'etat. And that's what's going on here. Now, a lot of people are beginning to realize that all these corporations that are pushing for a globalist agenda are actually leading us into a new era of global American fascism. Washington, D.C. wants to take this fascist dictatorship that we have built in the United States of America and make it the norm for the entire world, which is not surprising, because ultimately, if you think about it, all private central banking is inherently fascistic in its economic nature. That's where we're going. The New World Order is going to be the greatest dictatorship in history. It will not tolerate freedom of speech, because much of it is being brought into existence with hoaxes and frauds and deceptions. Oh, there's a global flu pandemic. They did this in 2009. When pigs fly flu, we need a global health authority everybody is answerable to. The global war on terror, that didn't really pan out. The global economic collapse. And finally, of course, global warming. That was a big foundation for the New World Order. Well, the world is in danger. We need a global environmental authority that everybody will answer to. And that one just absolutely collapsed. So if you bring in any kind of a government, regional or global, that created itself with lies and fraud, it cannot allow freedom of speech just to protect the circumstances of its own creation. So it is a guarantee when the New World Order is established that Bill of Rights will not be part of it. Because the money junkies and the tyrants, they hate freedom. They hate independence. They want you thoroughly under their control to do what you are told to do in their infinite glory. Now, getting on to the economy, we are seeing all these indications of serious trouble in the global economic system. Now, Donald Trump is a little glib out there saying we're never going to default, we've got the printing presses. Technically, he's true. They can go on creating money out of thin air until we're down where Zimbabwe was, where we're walking around with $100 trillion notes in our pockets, except that long before we reach that point, the rest of the world will turn away from the dollar towards the ruble and the yuan, and the U.S. economy will implode. Now, Carl Icahn, who is a billionaire, has gone out with a minus 150% net short position. This is an historic short. He's basically betting a huge amount of money. There's going to be an imminent market downturn, and he's betting a lot of money on that one. Article coming out of RINF.com, The Ugly Truth Behind the Greek Bailout. Well, it's not a bailout. It never was a bailout. It's another loan. And the money from the loan is going to go to Greece and immediately turn around and come back out to the bankers. The only ones getting the bailout are the bankers to try and cover up that 11th marble problem. And they're doing it on the backs of the people of Greece, and then they're going to do it on the backs of the people of France, and then they're going to do it on the backs of the people of Germany, and then they're going to do it on the backs of the people of Poland. Do you understand the pattern? Private central banking is a system of enslavement, ruled by compound interest. And it's no more a legitimate form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former failed systems, rule by compound interest only works as long as you allow yourself to be brainwashed into believing this is the way the world is supposed to be. And it isn't. Our nation was started with a very different system, one that worked for the nation and its people. Now, as you know, in recent days, there have been leaks of the Trans-Pacific Partnership documents and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership documents. They're all over the web. Greenpeace got a big chunk of them. Other people are leaking them. And at this point, we've pretty much got the full texts of the current negotiating memo out there for public view. And it is horrific to read. It's basically saying transnational corporations are above the laws of sovereign nations. You know, if a company wants to sell you a dangerous medication, you can't stop them. That's restraint of trade, and we can sue you for interfering with profits, because profits are the new god of humanity. Have you seen any of this on ABC News, or NBC News, or CBS News, or MSNBC, if anybody's still watching them, or Fox, or CNN? Not a word. They're all busy about Donald Trump hates women and whatever else they're going to be saying about him. Now, our economy is in serious, serious trouble. Nobody knows what to do. But the Washington Post knows who to blame. Knows who to blame. We would be in a recovery. But it's those stingy Americans ruined the recovery, because they don't go on out there and spend money. That's the Washington Post's attitude. The reason the economy is not in recovery is because Americans aren't going on out to the shopping malls and buying this year's fashions, the trinkets, gadgets, and gizmos, and all the rest of that stuff. And if we were doing that, the recovery would be just fine. There's only one flaw in the Washington Post's thinking. We don't have the money to buy these things. And unlike the government, we don't want to go into debt that we are not confident we can repay. And this is the Washington Post blaming the victims as part of a pathetic and desperate propaganda campaign to keep the American people from standing up and pointing their collective finger at Wall Street and saying, these are the guys who wrecked our economy, with the connivance of Washington, D.C. If I had investment capital, I'd be going long on tar and feathers right about now. Now, as you know, there are a lot of questions about just why the corporate media doesn't report certain stories, because it bothers their backers, their owners, their corporate advertisers. We were talking just the other day about this huge scandal about generic pharmaceuticals made in India being a serious problem in the United States of America. And certain paper journals, like Forbes and Bloomberg, actually reported on it, but it's not on the TV networks, because those TV networks make huge amounts of money from those glitzy commercials to sell you the latest, greatest, patentable creation from the pharmaceutical labs. And they even admit on the commercials, this stuff could kill you. And if it does, we told you so, you can't sue us. So we have this article over here over at Electronic Intifada, and it's talking about how Sheldon Adelson, who's this Nevada casino magnate, who I think is still under investigation for bribing Chinese officials, but he bought the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And a lot of people were concerned that he was basically going to turn it into a propaganda organ, and apparently he did, to the point where John L. Smith, the most widely read columnist at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, resigned, saying that Sheldon Adelson put a gag order on him, saying, you will not talk about what Israel's doing, you will support my candidates, you will go after the candidates I do not like. And Sheldon Adelson, like George Soros, is actually a very strong argument for socialism, because they keep demonstrating that people who get too much money are capable of great evil. Now, Donald Trump is out there talking about the minimum wage issue, and he's saying the federal government shouldn't be involved. This has to be a state issue. Leave it to the states. And I'm in agreement. First and foremost, because we need to see more power flow back to the states, because that's the way this country was set up. Second, it's common sense. Different states have different economic realities. You can have a high minimum wage in a state that's doing well, but its neighboring state that is in serious, serious trouble ought not to be held to that same benchmark. We're 50 separate states, 50 separate little subcultures. The one-size-fits-all economic approach doesn't work. It never has. Just like Common Core. Everybody's going to learn the same thing. No, if you live in an industrial city, you need one set of skills. If you're out in farming country, you need a completely different set of skills. Let the local community decide what the kids need to be taught. It's just common sense. But when you're a central federal government, you justify your existence and power by saying we're going to control everything centrally, which was, I should remind you, also the attitude of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, which led to disaster after disaster after disaster, Lysenkoism being a big one. Now, right now, looking at the skyrocketing cost of college, it's growing way out of bounds with the rate of inflation and the student loan crisis. We're now finding out that more and more parents are saying to their kids, you're going to have to pay for your college education. We can't help you. Parents helping their kids through college is becoming a rarity in our society. And that's a terrible thing, because if a kid has to fund their own college education, that plunges them onto that debt hook with the big barb on the end so they can't get off. Education used to be about finding better jobs, making yourself better. Now it's just another come on and scam to get you on that debt trap and never, ever let you off. Now, coming up on the Brexit, we're seeing the fear-mongering cranking up and also direct threats. European Union banks are now telling British firms that if Britain leaves the European Union, they will charge their borrowers more money, higher repayments, higher interest. This is economic extortion, trying to get British companies to say, well, yeah, we're going to stay in the EU and enslave the British people to the European Central Bank, because otherwise our loans are going to go right through the roof. And there's another argument against economic globalism. When you're economically entangled with another country, that other country has control over you. I'm against globalism. Big surprise there, I know. I think humanity and human civilization is best served with a planet Earth with 1,000 little tiny nations all over it, all of roughly equal size, taking care of themselves and their own people. And yes, there's going to be cross-border trade and tourism and everything, but you're going to avoid the ills of the global empire builders who are building these empires for their own power and profit and could care less how much harm they cause the people underneath them. We got to take a break for commercials. We got a bunch of callers waiting online. We'll be right back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the phones. Dane in Kentucky. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yes. I'd just like to say aloha, and I appreciate what you're doing and the fact that you don't always, blame God for our issues. But anyway, yeah, I have insurance through my work for the government, state employee, and it was actually cheaper for me to purchase rescue inhalers online from India than it was to actually go through the doctor. So,
well, I understand that. I understand that. But this is a classic case of getting what you pay for, because there is an acknowledged major problem with these Indian drug manufacturers. And you may luck out and get something that works out really well, but there have been problems. And I was talking about this the other day. There was a Cipro generic put out by one of these Indian manufacturers that actually killed 13 people because they'd run out of the normal filler, and they put in another chemical to make the pills the right size. It turned out to be a component from rat poison. They weren't even paying attention. And if you go over and you look at the FDA, you're going to see all these lists of recalls, which aren't made public.
Okay.
It basically goes out through the pharmaceutical companies. But by the time the recall goes out there, it means these medications are already out there being sold and used. And, at the very least, you may get medications that just don't have the proper amount of active ingredient in them, may not even have the active ingredient at all. In other cases, there could actually be materials in there that are harmful to you. And I understand that medical care costs in this country are very, very high. And the reason I made a big stink about this is because back in 2004, the U.S. government actually passed a law to make it illegal for Americans living near the Canadian border to go on up into Canada and buy pharmaceuticals there. And they were screaming, oh, we have no way of knowing that Canadian pharmaceuticals are safe, even though the Canadian pharmacies and the American pharmacies buy from the same suppliers. But ever since that forced marketplace and everybody, needing to go cheap because of the high cost of medical care and medical insurance, this all actually goes back to Obamacare opened up this opportunity. People are so desperate to get their medications at lower cost, it is a golden opportunity for people who are going to counterfeit medications. And it's an absolute epidemic. And nobody wants to talk about it because they need you to believe that the pharmacy only has your best interests at heart. They need you to believe that the doctor cares about your health. And they don't. It's all about maximizing profits. And so I know it's going to cost a lot more, but if you're given a prescription for medication, go for the name brand from a recognized pharmaceutical company in the U.S. and Europe, and even then you're not safe. We've got big companies like Searle and
right.
Eli Lilly get caught with all this stuff. And first and foremost, if you can cure what you're dealing with any kind of natural or homeopathic remedy, go that route first. Good diet, plenty of rest, plenty of liquids, and so forth. Okay? Now, I'm not a doctor, and I don't intend to pretend to be one like that, but there is there's a serious problem out there. And again, Forbes reported on it, Bloomberg reported on it, and we need to be very, very cautious about this because, our health and safety is clearly subordinate to the desire to make a fast buck.
Well, I lucked out, so I'll definitely probably go another route next time. So.
All right, well,
thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, it would be great if we actually had a guaranteed safe source of pharmaceuticals. We don't, not in the current age. We're going to switch over to Dee in Michigan. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. What can I do for you?
Good. I found my palate cleanse after the Alex Jones show. Finally, found you. Yeah, I had a question about Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes.
Have you heard anything about him being related to David Rockefeller?
I have no idea. Maybe if you go far enough into the family tree, we're all related to everybody.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that all the censorship's going on. And
Well, I don't think that has anything to do with his necessarily being related to Rockefeller. When you have a large centralized media system, whether it's a television network or a radio network or Facebook or MySpace or any of these other things, it is going to be infiltrated by the government in order to control the flow of the content. And yes, we have these former Facebook employees who are out there saying they were regularly censoring and downplaying conservative news and points of view. So take it for what it's worth. I mean, Facebook is great for sharing cookie recipes, but don't expect to find any truth and accuracy over there. Thank you for the call. Dee, we're going to let you go, and we'll be right back in a minute. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the Brexit, and one of the reasons the people of Britain are fed up with this whole European Union idea is because the EU and ECB are sucking vast amounts of wealth out of Britain. And all the British are getting back are restrictive, annoying, microscopic regulation and tinkering and tampering. Because when you have a central tyrannical government, they need to come up with more laws to justify the money they take away from you. I mean, I think we'd all prefer it if they just took the money and went away and left us alone. But no, from their point of view, they have to come and say, the reason we're taking your money is because we're going to come in and tell you how to live your life better. Now, apparently, over at Sneinton Market in Nottingham, they have what they call a market. We would call it an open-air strip mall. And they've got 46 spaces. And they just went through a £4 million revamp. And they're trying to restart this up, and they can't because there's a new European rule saying that when you have these little multiple stalls in a common market area, you're not allowed to actually have payment systems in the individual stalls anymore. You can't just go into a stall that is selling fabric, buy a bolt of fabric, pay the proprietor, and go on out. No. Under the EU rules, there has to be a central payment point where all transactions can be monitored and recorded. So I'm sure for the money junkies, this makes a lot of sense. We will know what they're doing. But think about it from the customer's point of view. You go into a stall, you buy a bolt of fabric. You get a little paper ticket. You then walk to the central payment location. You make the payment. You get another little paper ticket. Then you have to walk back to that place where you finally take delivery of your bolt of cloth. Nobody wants to go through that. And as a result, right now, out of these, let's see, how many stalls? 46 spaces. Only 3 are filled, and one of those is on the verge of going out of business. It's a classic case of bad law. When central tyrannies make law, they'd like to make a good law, but if they can't make a good law, they're going to make a bad law just to prove that they're relevant. Another article coming out of the Telegraph. Brexit support grows as businesses tire of the scaremongering. It's backfiring on them. That part about Godzilla coming back and eating Great Britain if they left the European Union, I think that may have been the shark right there, David. But it is. Everybody recognizes what's going on. And I think traditionally for the British people, they're used to the idea that Britain itself used to be a global empire. And probably a lot of them who've studied history know how the British Empire treated its colonies, like the early United States or India before Gandhi showed up. And so probably most Brits understand that being part of somebody else's empire is not going to be a good deal. Everybody always talks about Alexander the Great and his tremendous empire. Wasn't it great and wonderful? Well, it was for Alexander and his cohorts, but it was pretty much crud for everybody else in the way. The British people understand how empires work because they used to be one themselves. They don't want to be part of somebody else's empire. They know it's going to be a horrible, horrible deal. Now, Ian Duncan Smith is out there saying the reality is the European Union is, like the United States, a fascist economic dictatorship. It helps the rich at the expense of the poor. We're seeing the rise of global fascism. Mussolini, in his wildest wet dreams, couldn't have conceived of the world as it is today here. Now, getting on to the immigration crisis, which is pretty much all over Europe right now. Apparently, when David Cameron wanted to renegotiate Britain's relationship with the European Union, he wanted to include a break on the migrants coming across from France to Great Britain because it's been a big problem. Apparently, Angela Merkel overruled him in the negotiations, acting like she had a veto, which she's not supposed to have. And Cameron apparently just went along with it, saying, oh, all right, we'll take the refugees here. It's ridiculous. Something very strange happened up in Munich, Germany, earlier today, and it's actually in the town of Grafing near Munich. There was a stabbing incident. 1 dead, 3 injured. Man reportedly shouting Allah Akbar, and he stabbing people at this train station. Now, the first reports said Islamic, blah, blah, blah. Then the story changed. They dropped all the thing about him screaming Allah is great and said, well, this is a German citizen with known mental health issues. Because we can't say anything bad about the immigration thing. So obviously he's got mental health issues. Really? Was he on prescription antidepressants by any chance? Another story, Investment Watch blog up in Sweden. There was this mother who just in the warmth and generosity of her own heart decided she was going to open up her home to one of the refugees, who promptly proceeded to sexually assault her 10-year-old daughter. You need to understand, migration, immigration, that's uncontrolled. Illegals coming across the border. It's acting as a filtering system. You are not getting the best people from those source countries. You're getting the dregs, the ones who couldn't make it in their own home, the ones who are fleeing prosecution. And that's why when we have all these illegal immigrants coming across the southern border, we've got gang members, drug couriers, and worse than that, we've got people with highly contagious diseases this country hasn't seen in a long time. It wasn't all that long ago tuberculosis was declared to be eradicated in the United States. Now it's back, being brought in by the illegal immigrants. CDC is warning their own people to be careful. The warning wasn't made public until recently. It's one of those little inside secrets. We know there's tuberculosis, but we don't need to tell the people. Now, we have a video up on WhatReallyHappened.com, and it's of Larry Silverstein. And what's really interesting is that this is a speech he made in Israel talking about how plans for the new World Trade Center began in April of 2000. Now, this is 1.5 years before September 11th happened, and also more than a year before he officially took over the lease of those buildings. So there's a little something to give you a hymn, along with Silverstein saying that he agreed with the decision to pull Building 17, which is demolition slang for bring it down. And they did, into its own footprint. Which is time for me to remind everybody about a possibility. We've been hearing about all these break-ins, hack attacks. My servers are under constant attack these days. And I think we need to be on the alert for something. The U.S. needs to regain the belief, or at least the fear of the American people against the other guys, to try and reignite the war fever, because that fever has cooled. And they need a new event, something to catalyze the public. Crashing buildings and airplanes, passé. Been there, done that, didn't buy the T-shirt. Didn't even buy the ticket to the museum. So I think it's time to revisit an idea that we called the virtual 9/11, which is the U.S. and possibly Israel hack into and destroy the U.S. banking system, maybe the net as a whole, take it all down, and blame it on Iran or Syria or Russia or China. Now, this does a couple of things for them. First of all, it will justify complete government control of the Internet when they get it back on up. Second, Instead of economic mismanagement, the economic crash is now an act of war. You know, we were on a great plan. The recovery was underway despite you stingy Americans, but those gosh darn Chinese and Russians ruined our economy by attacking our computers. I'm sure they're at least considering it, and we need to talk about it to act as a deterrent, to send the message. We're already suspicious you're going to try something like that. To create a climate of doubt, because if we can make them doubt that they'll get away with whatever the cover story is for the next false flag, it's going to give them pause. Doubt is our most potent weapon against those who would blow up buildings and blow up computers and blow up nuclear reactors and airports and the rest of it to try and trick us into war. Now we're going to go back to the phones. Renee in North Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, you broached the subject, and I really agree with your response. Now, a lot of conservatives, if you say certain things, they have like this Pavlovian response, and they don't really understand. I am with you. I would take Nordic capitalism, which is what Bernie promotes, over this corrupt fascism. I'd press that button in a minute. Because the thing is, what people don't understand is we call it socialism, but it's also Google Nordic capitalism. The thing is, the people over there, they are required to have guns. They're not trying to take them away. They have to have them. Two, in surveys, they're the happiest. They also have the least corruption. The thing is, they're not going around the world invading all kind of countries. They just
they don't need to
protect their own against invasion. The thing is, a lot of people, because if you say socialism, they just have this Pavlovian response, and they're not thinking. The thing is, I agree with you. I would take that over this corrupt fascism.
Okay, Renee, let me just insert something here. The problem is, because of our cultural, educational upbringing, when you say socialism, everybody immediately leaps over to Soviet Union, communism, blah, 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 blah. But socialism exists in a lot of countries, especially in Europe, and it works very well for them. Now, in a lot of European countries, France, a good example, Norway's another one, people there pay pretty much the same tax rates Americans do, but they get value for money. They get subsidized education. They get subsidized health care. They get good streets, good water coming out of their taps, all the things that the government is supposed to provide. Here in the United States of America, where we're under fascism, we are taxed for huge amounts of money, and yet we're expected to pay for our own advanced education, going into debt. We're expected to pay for our own medical care, going deeper into debt. We've got toxic water coming out of our faucets, toxic medications coming out of our pharmacies. And to me, I mean, obviously the European socialist system is far superior to the fascism we have in the United States.
Well, I just wanted, because people, like I say, they have that Pavlovian response, and they need to understand that compared to the corrupt criminal system we have now, that would be a vast improvement. I know it's hard for them to accept, but it's true, and it's known under another name, Nordic capitalism.
Well, anybody who's spent any time in Europe is going to immediately see the differences between our cultures. I went through that in the 1980s before things really got bad in the United States, and even then I could see the fundamental differences in society. And again, I managed to spend Christmas in the Marienplatz in Munich, and it was the first Christmas I ever experienced that really felt like what I thought Christmas was supposed to be based on books I'd read as a child. And it just underscored that here in the United States, Christmas, and for that matter, pretty much every other holiday, is just another come on to get you into the stores, to get your money. And we're a very shallow, thin, decadent, and cynical society. And in Europe, they balance their priorities. Yes, we all want to make money, but there are other priorities, like making sure our kids are healthy and safe, and making sure our cities are clean. I mean, when I was in Munich, I mean, they were just absolutely fanatic. You don't litter. They got little trash cans on every street lamp pole, and they're proud of the cleanliness of their city, and the pavements are well maintained. You don't see that here. People are just oblivious to the decay around them, and they just add to it. cigarette light wrappers out of the car window, beer cans out of the car window. I've lived in some very beautiful places like Washington State and here in Hawaii, and it's somewhat unnerving, the disdain that people have for where they live, and it's a reflection of their disconnect from the society in which they're told that they live. If they don't feel like they're part of it, they can't respect it, and they treat it that way. Okay?
Well, I think that I think there's more division here. I think, like you said, people feel more like they're all members of the same club kind of over there, where they don't have as much division probably between the people, which is probably why they're shipping people in there from other areas to create it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Part of the New World Order. Okay, thank you for the phone call, Renee. We're going to switch over to John in West Virginia. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to talk to somebody that I haven't been around a lot because I don't get very good feedback from my friends. I've watched some videos of Trump's entire speeches, and he's a very good speaker. His audience is always excited, to hear him talk. And he's got this confidence and this air of confidence and about talking about Hillary Clinton. And I'm thinking, if it's between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton will be clobbered.
Yeah, like a baby seal. But don't forget, Hillary Clinton has got all of the vote riggers on her side.
Yes, but...
Yes.
I mean, those vote riggers are only good if you've got somewhat, you're somewhat close in the election.
True.
And I think Donald Trump will clobber her. And what I'm thinking is that, how they haven't really talked a lot about these charges that they have, the FBI has against Hillary. And I'm thinking that maybe the Democrats would want to indict her before the Democratic convention so that she will not be the candidate, because the way I see it, Bernie Sanders has a much better chance against Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's what the numbers coming out of Ohio would indicate. But don't forget, Hillary Clinton is in a position to blackmail the entire government. And there are rumors floating around that she's literally sent out a message that if she is not made the President of the United States of America, she is going to tear the lid off of all the crimes and corruptions of the Clintons, which will also implode on the Bushes and basically bring the entire government down. So it's Hillary's way or the highway, and that makes her a person that is a liability for a lot of other powerful interests. So Donald Trump is not the only one who needs to worry about a bullet. Sorry to cut you off, John. We've got to take a commercial break. Thank you for the phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just when you think it can't get any worse and more corrupt in our government, it does. No matter how cynical I become, I just can't keep up with these people. Down in Arkansas, there's a judge, Cross County District Judge Joseph Boakman, has just resigned effective immediately because investigators found 4,500 nude photos of defendants who had traded sex with the judge for reduced sentences or parole. 4,500. And the fact that it got along this far reveals how weak the enforcement surveillance system. They're surveilling the American people. Everything that we do. Judges? No. Bernie made off with the loot? No. He ran rampant for 12 years. Now, turning to the world of computers, apparently the PerezHilton.com website got hit with a malvertising problem. And this has become a critical issue for anybody who runs a blog. And it's not just smaller blogs, it's some of the major ones, like Huffington Post got hit with this. And the way it is set up, the criminals will set up a company front, and then they will approach websites about advertising, and they'll start the advertising, and then after the ad is up and running for a while, they'll switch the payload to malware. And it's a huge problem. A lot of it is the ransomware that's going on out here. And, of course, the NSA, are just sitting on their hands. They're not doing a thing about it. The FBI's official recommendation is if you get hit with ransomware, you just go ahead and pay the ransom because we couldn't do a thing about it. I'll tell you what my theory is. I think all the cybercrime is being done by the U.S. government to loot more people from the population. I mean, if you think about it, the police are already stealing more from the American people than the robbers and muggers and burglars put together. The government's desperate for money. They didn't get that tax windfall they were going to get from Obamacare. Selling the carbon tax is hitting resistance. So if you need to loot and pillage and plunder your own population to keep the war machine funded, what do? Well, you turn to any kind of crime against your own people. Because it's either that, or the CIA and FBI and all these other agencies that are supposed to be protecting us are just a complete, total waste of tax money, and they should be closed down, and their salaries and resource budgets used to try and balance the budget. You can't have it both ways. You can't have an NSA that is watching everything going on online and cybercrime running rampant at the same time. The two don't line up. Either the NSA is incompetent or they're part of the problem. Take your pick. Now, over in Great Britain, there are rumblings that Sir Cliff Richard may finally be prosecuted over his abuse of children. It's certainly taking a very, very long time. Remember, justice delayed is justice denied. There's the music. We're going to be taking a little bit of a station ID break here. We're going to come back for hour number 3 of our show, so stay tuned. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And let's see, getting on back to our talking points. Apparently over in South Yorkshire, Great Britain, apparently 5 police officers have been called on the carpet. They were using a police helicopter to spy on people who were naked and having sex. Now, we all saw in the movie Blue Thunder this potential, although in the movie Blue Thunder, the naked girl apparently was enjoying showing herself naked to the helicopter crew. But we know this is a problem. And they're saying, well, you know, this is inappropriate use of the video equipment because they were making movies of these kids. And it is a reminder that when you give the government the ability to spy on you, or let me rephrase that, when you allow the government to have the ability to spy on you, they will use it for all kinds of naughty purposes. There's no control. There's no restrictions. They got these 5 because apparently it became a public issue and was an embarrassment to the department. We know that Edward Snowden is saying that the NSA has a, you know, they delight in going to people's iPhones and getting pictures of sons and daughters and sisters and brothers scantily clad for their own personal amusement, all of this at taxpayer expense. Now, longtime listeners will probably remember that I view this selfie phenomenon as a very negative symptom of the decline of our society. Our vanity run amok. I must have a picture of myself with something else here. If I need a picture of myself, I'll just go get one of my wanted posters. When I take a picture, it's of the subject. I don't need to be in it. But this is the thing. And they have the selfie sticks where they'll hold the phone and you get yourself. And I think it's kind of, it's vanity run amok. And there's a danger to it because apparently over in Portugal, there was a guy, 24 years old, climbed up the facade of a building to take a selfie of himself with the statue of Dom Sebastião in Lisbon, Portugal. This was a 16th century Portuguese crusader king. While he was up there taking his selfie, apparently the statue came loose and fell to the ground and shattered. This is a major cultural artifact. The Portuguese are a little upset, and our 24-year-old is in jail. And I'm reporting this story for 2 reasons. First of all, show respect for other people's property. Show respect for antiquities. It's not worth it, you know, get your picture with the moai and the moai falls over on you. down on Easter Island. The second reason is I am certain this 24-year-old did not intend to destroy that statue, but he's still going to jail. And the same logic applies to Hillary and her email server. Her defenders are out there saying, well, maybe some mistakes were made, but she didn't mean to do wrong. It doesn't matter. Title 18 specifically says, allowing classified U.S. information to be exposed through accident and negligence is a prosecutable crime. Your intentions have got nothing to do with it. So we need to keep the pressure up on that. At this point, I keep putting out that question. Was Hillary replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal? Was she selling American secrets while Secretary of State using her email server to deliver them and her charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments? There's no reason to rule it out. And the fact that nobody in government or corporate media will even touch this question, even to make fun of it and ridicule it, only reinforces that that may be the dark secret, the darkest of all dark secrets, at the heart of the Clinton campaign machine. Now, a little bit of good news. Over in Michigan, their Senate committee has passed a bill to end Common Core. They had a public hearing. It was jammed. They had children come on in. One of them was allowed to actually testify, saying that the Common Core standardized tests were asking them about things they hadn't actually been taught. There was almost no correlation between the Common Core provided curriculum and the final tests. It's like somebody just was grabbing pages at random from filing cabinets and putting together the material. Now, Common Core was a great system to sell brand new textbooks to school districts that had existing libraries of textbooks. Oh, no, you can't use last year's text. You've got to buy all new Common Core. Huge moneymaker. But it also imposed an educational system on children which was very different just for the sake of being different in order to justify forcing everybody to dump all of their old educational materials and buy brand new educational materials at high expense. And so Michigan, hopefully the beginning of a trend, is saying Common Core is out of here. And there's another reason for that, and it goes all the way back to what I was saying about allowing the states to determine minimum wage. We should allow the states to determine educational standards, because what people need to learn in an industrialized manufacturing state is not the same thing as people living in rural farming areas. And again, this idea of a one-size-fits-all across all 50 states, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, we're going to grab a phone call. Tom in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, sir. Three quick things. The first thing about the ransomware, best way to stop it, make sure you have backups. I'm pretty confident that the government's involved, because if they weren't, they should have been able to track these guys down and drop a drone on their head. The second thing is about the statue. Maybe this guy shouldn't be in jail. Maybe he should be a hero, because if the thing fell over that easy, it could have fallen over in a windstorm and killed a whole bunch of people.
Well, I think he was hanging on it.
Still shouldn't have come loose.
Well, I mean, when you're dealing with a building that's hundreds of years old, okay, and it hadn't come down in the wind and it hadn't come down in the rain. It didn't come down until this guy climbed up on it. And yeah, I'm sorry, he was wrong to do that. He's not a hero in any way, shape, or form.
Yes, I agree that he was wrong, but maybe it could have, like I said, maybe it was deteriorating to the point where it was so easy that it fell over. Anyway,
that's irrelevant.
Third thing is
hold on. I want to respond to that. That's irrelevant. What he should have done was stayed down on the ground and taken a picture of the statue. He doesn't need to be in there. Okay?
Yes.
That's why I think this whole selfie thing is such nonsense. In all of my life, I think I've taken just one selfie, and I only did that to show somebody who sent me a T-shirt. In fact, I think this is one I'm wearing right now. And I took a picture of myself in the T-shirt to send to him to say, thank you very much for the nice T-shirt.
Well, that's great. You know what I saw on in Philadelphia, the main highway is Route 76. They call it the Schuylkill. We call it the Schuylkill. But there was a guy driving down the road with a selfie pole sticking up out of the roof while he was driving, taking videos of the traffic that was all jammed up. and I thought that was an idiot. So, really, the last thing is Donald Trump. You know, he bought this big estate down in Palm Beach. I don't know when it was. I just saw this. And supposedly it had to fit with the township over the height of the flagpole. They didn't want him having a 50-foot flagpole because that would make the non-Americans feel bad. So she ran up like $120,000 in fines, and he finally made an agreement with them and said, okay, I'll give the $120,000 to the veterans minister, the veterans, and then I'll move the flagpole and lower it to 30 feet. They said, okay. So he had his construction company build a 20-foot hill in front of his building with a 30-foot pole up there. That's
Good for Donald. Good for Donald. Good for Donald. This idea that we should hide the American flag because it makes the illegals feel bad, I'm sorry. I'm not going to buy that one bit. The illegals snuck into this country.
Leave my country.
You deserve to be embarrassed. You snuck into our country. You deserve to be embarrassed when you look up at the flag and realize it's not yours.
Yes, I agree.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, the Canada wildfire situation is just out of control. Those people up in Fort McMurray, they've all lost their homes. They're now saying the fires could potentially burn for months. What the heck is going on? Yesterday we were reporting on how Russia had offered to send some of their monster water bombers to assist. Canada hadn't responded. Today Canada did. They rejected any international outside assistance to put out the wildfire. We would rather see it burn for the next 4 months than accept help from anybody outside the country. And it gets even worse than that. Canada has a giant water bomber of its own. It's called the Martin Mars. It's staged at Sprout Lake, British Columbia, just a short flight away from Fort McMurray, and would have been very effective in getting this fire under control early on. The bomber wasn't used. According to the company that owns that, they never got a phone call from Alberta to come and help fight the fire. And so what the heck is going on? Now, yesterday we were reporting on the realization that there's a lot of uranium ore underneath that town. And the uranium company, if it wanted to come on in and acquire that uranium, it would have to buy the town. Have to buy all the houses at full market value. Have to pay to relocate everybody. That costs a lot of money, and we can't let that happen. But if there's a fire by accident, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and it gets out of control and destroys the entire area, then everybody's going to move all by themselves. And the land can be bought with its mineral rights for pennies on the dollar. This is either incredible corruption in the Alberta government or it's incredible incompetence. One of the two. In both cases, either way you put it, that government should not be the government anymore. Not when they handle it that badly. Now then, sudden dark turn down in Flint, Michigan. If you thought we'd heard the last of that, you are wrong. There is a major lawsuit that is being brought by a former Flint, Michigan city administrator claiming that Mayor Karen Weaver ordered the people who were handling donations to deal with the Flint water crisis, specifically redirect the money to the Caring About Flint Political Action Committee, her campaign fund. The mayor of Flint, Michigan, was literally taking the money that Americans were sending on in to get clean, safe drinking water for the people of Flint and diverting it into her campaign fund. Like I said, no matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up with these people. And, you know, the people, it's a federal lawsuit filed by Natasha Henderson. And she was directed last February that when anybody called in to donate money for the Safe Water, Safe Homes, they were given directions how to send the money to the Caring About Flint Political Action Committee. I mean, I'll tell you this, Karen has just lost the election. Karen has lost that election. I mean, how horrible is that? The mayor of the town knows the water is causing permanent brain damage to children, takes the money that is intended to deal with that problem and puts it in her campaign fund. That's disgusting. It's sickening. That's more sickening than the water is. Oh, did you see where Barack Obama went down there and drank a glass of absolutely crystal clear water and said, see, the drinking water is safe in Flint? When you turn on a tap in Flint, the water isn't coming out crystal clear. It's tan, it's beige, it's cloudy. It was a fake. It's another fake. It's like when, Barack Obama went down to the Gulf of Mexico with one of his daughters, and they swam in some water, which turned out to actually be a swimming pool, not the Gulf itself. And then he ate a fish taco, and he said, absolutely, you can trust me, this fish came from the Gulf of Mexico. It's all public relations. We have a government that doesn't know how to fix problems, only how to make them look like they've gone away. I got to tell you, if I lived in Flint, Michigan, I'd be getting ready for the torches and the pitchforks for that mayor. Now, normally I don't cover sports, especially professional sports. I mean, it's not like I don't like them. It's just not normally part of the fodder for WhatReallyHappened.com. And this story kind of really stuck out because, as you know, athletes are drug tested. We've got to make sure that our athletes that go on out there and play games are perfectly drug-free for some reason. Personally, I'd rather have our people in government tested for drugs on that rigid a basis. But for some reason, even though they have more impact on our lives, they're above such things. But professional athletes who've got no influence over our lives at all, they're subject to this very strict drug regimen. Well, not too long ago, Congress passed a bill that removed country of origin labeling from pork and beef. And that is a problem because some beef from places like Mexico and China include steroids that are used to make the cows grow bigger, fatter, and faster. The chemical is called clenbuterol, which is banned by the NFL as a performance-enhancing drug. So here's the problem. You have NFL athletes who are living a clean life. They go to the supermarket. They get some beef, and they eat it, and they fail their next drug test, and they have no idea what hit them, because they're not allowed to have a choice where they get their meat from. Is that a messed up system, or what? What are they going to do? Tell the NFL players they have to all be vegetarians now? This is absurd. Absurd. Anyway. Here in Hawaii, they're actually considering a law that will outlaw, ban all gasoline and diesel-powered vehicles by, I think it's something like 2020, 2025, something like that. And they want to be all renewables by 2045, which I don't think I personally have to worry about at my age. But it's rather ill thought out because a lot of our tourism involves aircraft going from island to island, which can't run on solar cells, and watercraft, also not able to work on solar cells. And yes, if you know what you're doing and you're a rag setter, you can get from island to island, or at least out there, you know, with the wind power, and there's a lot of that going on here, but I think it's a little bit restrictive. But they want us all to be in electric vehicles, and that will be clean and wonderful and environmentally friendly. Well, not really. Over in the Daily Mail, they've got an article pointing out that the electric and hybrid and so-called eco-friendly cars are putting out just as much pollution as gas and diesels. And a big part of that has to be with the fact that if you have an all-electric vehicle, and even in Hawaii we've already got the electric charging stations at the shopping mall. If you've got an electric vehicle, you can park close and recharge there. That electricity has to come from somewhere. Here in Hawaii, our electricity comes from oil-fired generating stations. And because there's no such thing as a 100% efficient conversion by generating the electricity remotely, sending it over the power lines into the charger, into the car, into the battery, to the motor. You're actually having to burn up more oil to power that car than if it had a normal gasoline engine. It just moves the pollution somewhere else. It's like when they came out with this idea for ethanol-based gasoline. It sounded really good. They didn't think it all the way through. It was just the latest buzzword, the latest get-rich-quick scheme. Because it turns out ethanol doesn't have the same energy as gasoline. You had to buy and burn more of it to get the same work out of your car. And it was not carbon neutral when you added in the carbon footprint of the processing of sugar into the ethanol. And finally, for older cars, that ethanol destroyed the fuel system. Now that they're up to that 15 version of the ethanol fuel, there are major car manufacturers who are saying up front, the engine warranty is null and void if you are using these alcohol gasolines, because it will wreck the engine. They are not designed to handle it. There are dual fuel cars out there, but if you have an older car and you don't feel like, updating like me, you're kind of stuck unless you can find a gas station that still sells ethanol-free gasoline, and luckily we have one. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We got a lot of noise outside. A lot of military aircraft flying in and out of the bases down there, rattling the windows and so forth. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Matt in Colorado. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How's it going, Mike?
It's going just fine. What can I do for you?
Yeah, sorry you got that attack. I had to listen to you on my phone or on the call-in line because I couldn't even use the WhatReallyHappened.com website. So.
Well, it should be up and running right about now, but yeah, at this point, as we get closer to the election, I'm getting these attacks literally all day long, and they're very sophisticated. Well, some are sophisticated, some are very obvious, some kid in a basement with downloaded tools. But it's a big part of the effort right now.
Just in your site?
I'm not going to tell you what they're doing. I don't want to give them any more ideas. But I've written a lot of automated systems that hold a lot of it at bay. But every once in a while, the one that nobody can defend against are the the spoofed IP distributed denial of service attacks. Because the IP coming in is randomly chosen, there's no way to block them.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah, sorry about that, but the reason that I actually called was I wanted to get your opinion on renewable energy, and because you were talking about it, and I am a proponent of solar, and I'm wondering if you think that that's viable and scalable for meeting our energy needs.
Well, there's always going to be upper limit on the total amount of energy available. The biggest roadblock right now is getting more efficient solar cells. And I don't know what the current state of the art is, but they need to get up to something like 85-90% efficiency and conversion to really become practical. And even so, it's going to be a huge amount of area for the solar panels. But it's certainly an option for a lot of people. We have a Times Market owned strip mall down at the bottom of the hill. They went solar. They covered over the parking area and all the roofs, and they've got a just very impressive solar system there. Hawaii was really going solar, but the problem is now the Hawaii Electric Company is complaining that they're starting to lose customers and revenue, and so the city is starting to slow down handing out permits for solar conversions for private residents.
Yeah, well, Hawaii is a unique case from my experience. Because of the municipality and the utility there.
Well,
but I think for the mainland, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Well, there's a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of wind power on the island. Unfortunately, we're falling victim to something that has hit the wind power industry as a whole. Those turbines are not lasting the 25 years they were promised. They're already starting to fall apart, and the company that made the parts is no longer in business. So we've got a lot of corroded relics. Down on the Big Island, there's an entire field of windmills that just stands there, can't be used anymore. We had this really giant one up on the north shore of Oahu, and they finally got a demolition crew in to basically take it down. So there's a new wind farm up there. There's something really ironic. If the wind is blowing too hard, they actually have to feather the blades and stop the windmills, because apparently these windmills are not designed to take the strain of a high wind. And it just strikes me as kind of short-sighted. If you've got a high wind, that's when you store up as much power as you can. But apparently that's not the way they think about these things. Okay?
Yeah, well, that is definitely short-sighted. And then what do you think about battery storage?
Well, as you say, it's a storage medium, and always be nice to see more improvements in terms of efficiency and capacity on those as well. I've heard rumblings about a new development that is going to allow batteries to have 8 times the charge of conventional, the current state-of-the-art. Always a great thing to do if you can store more and more power, because if you're talking about electric cars or even electric airplanes, they're not going to run directly on the power from the solar cells. You're going to have to save up a surge, and the battery is definitely needed for that. Higher capacity, smaller size, lower weight, those are the goals. I don't see any theoretical reason why these cannot be achieved.
Do you think that battery that Tesla is rolling out will be sufficient to meet those needs?
Well, I think
it's actually transitioning to solar.
I think it's sufficient to meet the needs that Tesla has designed it for, but there's always going to be room for improvement. But again, with solar, the real focus should be on making the solar cells themselves more efficient, because that is the weak point in the chain now. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Matt. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, earlier in the program, we had somebody call in saying that Putin was offering free land to British subjects who wanted to move to Russia, and I expressed a little bit of skepticism. I wanted to see the story, and one of our very attentive listeners was kind enough to send me the link to the story. This is not directed at Great Britain. Okay, Russia has their equivalent of the frontier, the wilderness, way out to the eastern part. And the Russian government had already passed a law saying that anybody who moved into these areas they want settled would receive a land grant of about 2.5 acres, 1 hectare, in the far eastern federal district. And that was to anybody in Russia. Now they've expanded it to non-Russians, to foreigners. Anybody in any country who wants to emigrate to Russia and live in this far eastern federal district, you get 2.5 acres of land absolutely free. If I were a young man, I'd probably be looking at this right now. Going out to the frontier and be a settler. A little too old for that sort of thing. But that's the story, and it's not directed specifically at Great Britain. Now then, as you know, we reported recently on this experience over at Harvard University where 41 students came down with mumps. And the corporate media was out there saying, see, this is why you need your mumps vaccination. Go on out and get the mumps vaccination. Then it came out that all of the Harvard students who had mumps got it after getting the mumps vaccine. And the corporate media and the vaccine companies are trying to come up with all kinds of excuses about, well, you know, we're sure the vaccine didn't cause the illness, but they must have gotten, a heavy exposure to mumps, and if there's a heavy exposure to mumps, the vaccine won't work, but under no circumstances should you believe the vaccine caused the illness. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. Story coming out of Blacklisted News, another tragedy. Teenage girl, 13-year-old Shazelle Zaman, was given the HPV shot, immediately developed severe headaches, vomiting, and dizziness. They took her to Bury's Fairfield Hospital. She died 5 days later. But it makes money. That's all that matters. It makes money. So a few people die. You're so picky. You just don't understand that corporations live on profits, and profits are above all. Now, remember out in California, State Senator Richard Pan, he was the driving force behind Senate Bill 277, which mandated vaccinations for children in California, no exemptions allowed, no religious exemptions, nothing. Unless you got a note from a doctor saying this shot was going to kill the kid would get the shot. Money, 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 pouring into the pharmaceutical industry. Vaccines are a $27 billion a year business, and with that much money, they can buy whatever government they need. Now, the producer of the film Vaxxed, Del Bigtree, went up there to talk to Richard Pan, and this is where it gets really funny. They went into his office up in Sacramento and said, we'd like to interview him, and the secretary said, oh, he's not in the office right now. At which point they look down the hallway and they see this Richard Pan trying to sneak out the back door of his office and run down the hall and down his stairwell, and they follow him and they got it all on video. Talk about the courage of one's convictions. It's a funny video. That is a great one. And those of you in California, especially if you're in, Pan's district, get that video, show it to everybody that you know. Because as long as he's running, let's make sure he keeps on going after November. Going back home, leaving the state maybe. Now, here's the story of a doctor, Jane L.M. Donegan, who years ago, coming out of medical school, was pro-vaccine, because in medical school, doctors are indoctrinated with the religion of vaccines. This will work. This will make you well. And apparently, over the years, having witnessed so many of these adverse reactions themselves, Dr. Donegan is now a vaccine skeptic and going public, saying this is a problem. This is being driven by economics, and issues of safety and efficacy are just, they're not a factor anymore. This lust for pieces of ink and paper has overridden all other aspects of our psyche. It's destroyed what used to be the best characteristics of being an American person. And we need to restore that balance. And again, I don't have a problem with people who want to make money. It's how they're doing it that we should be very critical of. And again, this is a failure of Washington, D.C., because they justify this vast amount of money they take from us with the idea that there are going to be these government agencies like the FDA and the USDA and all the rest, which are looking out for us. And we find out generally they don't. They don't. They're just there to put on a show to make it look like everything is okay. But it really isn't. Another article, this is out of Natural News, reinforcing the idea that yearly mammography screenings are actually causing more cancers than they detect and cure. But it makes money. Getting them to do it year after year, that's more money. Don't you guys understand how this is supposed to work? We're here to make money. I've got to pay back my student loans for medical school. I've got to make the payments on my Porsche. The CDC is now admitting prescription painkiller drugs are killing 40 Americans every single day. Every single day. I don't even think the phrase health care is applicable anymore. It's a health scam. We're spending all this money on health care, and the health of the average American has actually been in decline for years and years and years. So let's get on to human caused global warming, because we're getting close to the end of the show. Earlier, actually it was end of last week, there was a story that came on out talking about 5 Pacific islands that were vanishing. And the headline was global warming and the seas are rising, and we've got to stop carbon dioxide. Now, there's something you need to understand about these little Pacific coral atolls. There's a lot of erosion going on. Volcanoes put up new land. Erosion gets rid of the old ones. It's a constant ongoing process. And the authors of the study that was being cited in this glaring headline of how global warming was destroying Pacific islands came on out and said, no, that's not what we found. We said the primary reason is erosion by the ocean, and that wind patterns were increasing the height of waves, and the waves were getting further on and over these coral atolls, which only stick up a few inches above the water. We're not even talking about islands that could actually be used for anything. It's an academic situation. And again, they grab the headlines, they go with it to push the agenda. Now, as you know, not too long ago, White House Science Advisor John Holdren came out with a video that said global warming causes these cold winters we've been going through. It's a rather desperate and pathetic lie. The Competitive Enterprise Institute filed a public records request for the documents backing up Holden's claim. The White House stalled. The judge said, you're not acting in good faith on this, and issued a court order turning over the documents. The White House then came back and said, well, the video by Holden is just his personal opinion. It's not an official communication. Therefore, it's not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Okay? Except there's a little bit of a wrinkle. Because back back in 2014, the White House was saying this was an official position document of the White House. They basically come up with the idea of the polar vortex. It's a name they made up to try and claim that global warming was causing colder winters. Now, there's always a vortex over the North Pole and the South Pole, the result of Coriolis effect. It's always been there. But they grab the name and say, the polar vortex, we would be warming, but the polar vortex is bringing the cold air down from the Arctic. And it's all a lot of nonsense. And it just reinforces the idea that the motto, the guiding philosophy of Washington, D.C. remains. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Now, out in California, Jerry Brown is sharpening up his quill pen, and he's going to write all these global warming executive orders. As governor of the state of California, he's going to tell the Californians they've got to do this and they've got to do that to save planet Earth from you icky-poo human beings. He just got called on that by California's Attorney General, saying you don't actually have that authority. The governor cannot just issue orders to the general population from his desk unless there's a declared state of emergency, and even then there are limits. And I know why they're pushing this global warming nonsense yet again. The government is broke. They can't steal enough from you with the police and the cybercrime. They didn't get the tax windfall they were hoping for from Obamacare. So they're trying to sell you the idea of the carbon tax. And they're not doing very well on that. They've got to get the fear-mongering up there. Oh, my goodness, the carbon is coming to get you. You know, carbon is plant food. The more carbon that we have, the greener the plants grow, the faster they grow, the larger they grow, and the more food they produce. That's the reality. Carbon dioxide is an indispensable component of the cycle of life on Earth. It's not a pollutant, regardless of what the Environmental Protection Agency says. Meanwhile, Hays, Montana is looking at possibly as much as 18 inches of snow through today, 3 to 6 inch for Judith Basin and Fergus County, and yes, the Michigan weather forecast is calling for snow by the end of the week. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. Now, not too long ago, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee is on the case with the EPA, because the EPA posted a report on their website regarding questions about glyphosate and the fact that the chemical, basically the EPA's review said the chemical is not carcinogenic to humans, standing in contrast with what we've seen from the World Health Organization and the CDC. The report was pulled just a few days later. And the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee is questioning why. Well, the reason is there's no way you can prove a negative. That report by the EPA was just as phony as the one from the CDC saying vaccines don't cause autism. And somebody must have called them on it and said, look, the report is obviously flawed. And they said, all right, well, we'll Orwellize it. It's not on the website. It was never there. You just imagined it. And if you think we actually said that glyphosate doesn't cause cancer, you're just a tinfoil hat, wild-eyed, kooky, conspiracy theory type person. Now, down in Carolina, North Carolina specifically, their state government produced a study to disprove the idea that people living near the Duke Energy coal plants were suffering a higher incidence of cancer and other illnesses. Unfortunately, they were called on that. An epidemiologist who reviewed the analysis for Facing South said it's typical smoke screen. That it's out there to basically support a desired agenda propaganda. It's not real science. We are unfortunately living under a government that doesn't actually know how to make anything work, or just doesn't want to, because it interferes with corporate profits. Their function is to put on a big show of outrage and harumphing and saying, oh, with this thing with the Flint water is terrible, we must do something about it. And then they grab all the money coming on in and put it to their political campaign. Now, here's a positive note. I think this is just absolutely thrilling. Up in Canada, schoolboy William Gaduri was studying Mayan culture and Mayan astronomy and discovered that Mayan cities are lined up in accordance with Mayan constellations. And that's actually a very common thing in the ancient world. If you look at the arrangement of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau and fill in some of the ones that have been torn down, you see constellations like Orion. So he was out there going around the points of the constellation, and he found an ancient Mayan city that nobody knew was there, using the Google Earth. Now that is amazing. I mean, this kid needs a full scholarship to college right now. I don't think they have Common Core up there in Canada. I don't think they have that at all. Meanwhile, what do we have for research down here in the United States of America? You are absolutely going to love this one. Story coming out of the Washington Times. There is a gentleman, let's see, Jeff Flake. He's a senator, and he's sort of taken over the Golden Fleece Award idea, and he put out a report about federal grants for research projects funded by you, the taxpayer. And apparently one of the projects they found was the federal government paid a researcher to have a bee sting his private parts. Have no idea why, but they got the money. And we need money to repair those Flint water pipes and to fight Zika and the rest of it. There was a study funded federally that concluded Democratic women in Congress were less feminine than Republican women. Who cares? This was a $50,000 National Science Foundation grant to the University of California at Los Angeles to measure the femininity of the political parties. I don't care. You shouldn't care. This is nonsense. The stuff that they are spending money on. And we know why they're doing it. They're buying the loyalty of these educational institutions to just go along with whatever the politics decides the science ought to be. Now, here's another one. NASA is trumpeting the discovery of atomic oxygen in the atmosphere of Mars. And they're basically talking about how they've detected free-flowing atomic oxygen up in the mesosphere, one of the layers of the Martian atmosphere. And they're out there saying, look what we have done. There's only one small wrinkle. We found it with the Viking orbiters back in the 1970s. We're seeing a lot of that. NASA is trying to recycle discoveries. It angers me no end that they're out there with curiosity and saying, well, this could be a sign of life and that might be a sign of life. And when they finally find something that's incontrovertible, they're going to say, we discovered indigenous life on Mars. Well, no, you didn't. Viking did. And we ought to give credit where credit is due, which is Dr. Gilbert Levin. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a quick reminder that if you are unable to listen to our broadcast on AM or FM or over the computer, you can call in and listen to RBN Live at any time on your phone at area code 605-562-5111. That's 605-562-5111. You will get the real news, real talk, real people, because you can handle the truth. I want to step on back here to the issue of the upcoming California primary, because there is a problem out in California. We mentioned it before, but we need to mention it again. And it has to do with the fact that out in California, the paperwork to register to vote is confusing. And people who don't want to say I'm a Republican or a Democrat, they're checking a box that says independent, not realizing that it points to an actual political party called the American Independent Party, which is extraordinarily conservative. And that means when they go to the primary, they're not going to be able to vote for their preferred candidate. And the Bernie Sanders campaign is out there saying this is obviously aimed at taking primary votes away from him, because the registration paperwork is deliberately unclear what you're checking there. It just says independent. It doesn't list out the party name. Now, the good news is that until the 23rd of this month, if you live in California, you can go to registertovote.ca.gov. That's registertovote.ca.gov. And you can verify how you're registered to vote, and if necessary, you can change it. So please, all of you out there in California, visit this website, verify that you are registered to vote the way you think you are, because that registration paperwork has trapped a lot of people. And it will have a significant impact, negative impact, on Bernie Sanders unless people wake up and share this with everybody else you know in California. All righty, moving on here. Over in North Dakota, a study done by Duke University has confirmed that the surface soil and water is contaminated. Why? I don't know where that came from. Hello, can you hear me? I'm getting music.
I lost you for about 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Gosh darn, that's Skype and those hackers here. Okay, so North Dakota, Duke University study has confirmed the surface soil and the surface water are contaminated with radioactive materials from fracking wells. And they're saying it is high enough to have serious health implications for humans and wildlife. And it's just completely out of control. We have a government that absolutely doesn't care what happens to ordinary people as long as the corporations make money. The corporations have been made gods. They're legal persons entitled to rights. They get rights we don't even get. They're not real. They're made-up fictions. They're fairy stories. It's absurd. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Make a point of grabbing all this stuff off of WhatReallyHappened.com, forwarding it to everybody that you know. We need to get the word out. We need to force a change of direction in this country by hopefully peaceful means, or we're going to be in a world war, and there are going to be mushroom clouds right out that window and your windows as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.